I used to believe that numbers spoke louder than words, that if you just showed up every day, delivered what you promised, and outperformed expectations, the world would notice. Turns out, that's not always how it works, especially when you're a quiet man in a room full of people who mistake volume for value. My name's Noah. I'm 52, divorced, no kids. I live in a modest mid-century house in Palo Alto that I bought back in 2009, right after the housing crash. When the price was half of what it's worth today, it has 3 bedrooms, but only one is used. The other 2 are filled with books I never finish and tech equipment I never use. For 17 years, I worked as Chief Revenue Officer at Stratus Edge, a fintech company that started out scrappy and smart. Back in 2006, we were 10 people in a shared office space. By the end of 2023, we had over 200 employees, and I was responsible for $143 million in closed enterprise contracts, exactly half of our total revenue that year. And yet, when investors asked about growth, my name was never mentioned. I was the numbers guy. The guy who stayed behind when everyone went out for celebratory drinks. The one who made sure the lights stayed on. I wasn't flashy. I didn't post thought leadership threads on Twitter or brag about my 20-hour work days. I didn't need to. I thought results would earn respect. But in the boardroom, where titles were supposed to mean something, I was often the one who got interrupted mid-sentence by some 30-something VP who'd been with the company for less than 2 years. I would sit there, listening to them regurgitate a point I had made 5 minutes earlier, only louder, with more hand gestures. Everyone nodded like it was new. And I let it happen, every time. You're not paid to be seen. My father used to say, you're paid to deliver. Remember that. He was a construction foreman who raised 3 kids on union wages in San Jose. The kind of man who worked with his hands, spoke with his eyes, and never once said he was proud of me, but always made sure I had gas in my car. My older brother, Marcus, became a trial attorney in L.A., famous for winning billion-dollar class actions. My sister, Elise, runs a nonprofit that's been profiled in the Times twice. When we have family dinners, my father brags about Marcus's courtroom wins and Elise's foundation galas. He nods at me and says, and Noah's still doing that computer thing. The computer thing. I used to laugh it off. I told myself I didn't need recognition. I had security, autonomy, numbers. But lately, something shifted. I started feeling the weight of being overlooked, of pouring everything I had into a company, a career, a life, and realizing that I was just a line item on someone else's spreadsheet. I was tired of being the man who fed the machine, but never got to touch the controls. I began to ask myself quietly, late at night, if no one sees you, do you really exist? I didn't know it then, but everything I had believed about loyalty, about value, about staying in your lane was about to be burned to the ground. It started the same way most endings do, with a meeting invite that didn't feel quite right. The subject line was sterile. Revenue Realignment Review, 9:00 a.m. I'd had hundreds of these meetings over the years. Normally I'd be the one presenting, walking through quarterly projections. client acquisition metrics, conversion percentages, numbers that didn't just keep us alive, they kept us ahead. But something about this one was off. No agenda, no prep materials, just a time, a floor number, and a vague title. I walked into conference room 24B and immediately noticed that the usual stakeholders weren't there. No CFO, no legal, just Alex Rivera, the new CEO, and a woman from HR I barely recognized. Alex was 35, fresh from a high-profile acquisition and 2 TED Talks, slick, charismatic, and fluent in buzzwords. He'd been at Stratus Edge for 3 months, long enough to have a preferred kombucha in the fridge, but apparently not long enough to understand who built the house he now lived in. He didn't shake my hand, didn't ask how I was doing. He just opened a silver MacBook, looked up, and said, "Noah, this is going to be hard to hear." My pulse slowed. My ears didn't. "We appreciate what you've contributed over the years, but your methodology, while consistent, isn't aligned with the adaptive, scalable growth vision we're pursuing. We need to transition toward more agile frameworks." I blinked. I brought in $143 million in revenue last year. He nodded like I'd confirmed his point. "Yes, and we're grateful for that. But this isn't about the past. It's about what comes next." HR slid a folder across the table. 2 months, severance, a mutual non-disparagement clause, NDA language so thick it practically hummed. I didn't say a word. I just stood up. I don't remember the walk back to my office, but I remember the feeling like I was watching my own reflection crack in real time. I packed the few things I cared about: a framed photo of my mother, a leather notebook with 17 years of client notes, and a Mont Blanc pen my old boss gave me after we crossed 100 million for the first time in 2016. 17 years, gone in 17 minutes. No goodbye party, no thank you email, just a badge deactivation and silence. But the real hit came later that night. I was sitting at my kitchen table, half a glass into a bottle of Syrah, when a friend from our sales team forwarded me a pitch deck, one that had just been sent to prospective investors. The title slide said, "Stratus Edge Reimagining Revenue Operations for a Post-Pandemic Economy." The second slide was my model, my revenue life cycle, renamed and color-shifted, but unmistakably mine. Same structure, same 3-tiered client segmentation. Even the quarterly cadence was identical. The only thing missing was my name. I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to decide what hurt more, the betrayal or the fact that I'd let myself believe I was too valuable to discard. And as if the universe needed one more twist, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, my brother. "Big day tomorrow. Rehearsal dinner at 5. Wear something sharp. Elisa's husband is speaking. You'll like him." He was getting married again, his 3rd time. A wine country ceremony for 300 guests at a Napa estate that cost $120. $1,000 for the weekend, not including catering. I knew because I helped pay for it. $50,000. To be exact, a family investment. Marcus had called it 6 months ago, said I could give it as a wedding gift. Except now, as I stared at the full guest list attached to his email, I realized something. I wasn't on it. Noah Grant, absent. I checked again, scrolled 3 times, searched, nothing. I texted Marcus, "Hey, just double-checking, did I get left off the list?" He replied 10 minutes later, "It's more of a curated group. Elise's side has a lot of press and donors. Hope that's okay. You've always said you don't like big events anyway." I didn't reply. I just stared at the message. I'd lost my career that morning, and my place in my own family that night. That was the day I learned the truth. Sometimes, the people you think you're building for are the ones who will gut you clean and call it a pivot. Silence has a weight to it, heavier than anger, heavier than grief. The morning after the wedding, I wasn't invited to. I sat in my living room in the same button-down I'd ironed the night before, the untouched gift envelope thick with a $5,000 check. I'd planned to hand to Marcus personally was still in my coat pocket. The irony almost made me laugh. Almost. I didn't go to the wedding. Of course, I didn't. What would I have done, show up uninvited like some confused extra in a movie where everyone else had a script but me? Pretend I didn't see the guest list. Pretend the sting didn't matter. No, I stayed home, and for the first time in maybe a decade, I let myself collapse. The first thing I did was delete Slack, then LinkedIn, then my email. I turned off my phone, set it on the kitchen counter, and didn't touch it for a week. The only digital connection I allowed myself was my brokerage app, which told me I had $1 million to my name, mostly stock options from my years at Stratus Edge that I had exercised early, thankfully, before things turned corporate. So I wasn't broke, just broken. I drank instant coffee like it was punishment, ate cold cereal out of Tupperware, showered sporadically, slept during the day and stayed awake at night, staring at the ceiling fan spinning shadows on the walls for 2 weeks. I didn't open my blinds. It was easier that way. I ignored every call from Marcus, ignored the voicemail from Elise, saying she hoped I was processing things with grace. I didn't want grace. I wanted decency. And in the silence, memories came back like old debts I hadn't paid. I remembered my 30th birthday. Elise had just landed a $2 million grant for her nonprofit, and Marcus had been promoted to junior partner. At dinner, my father raised his glass and toasted to children who do more than we ever imagined. Then, after a pause, he added, "And to Noah, who keeps the lights on in the background." Background. I remembered the time Marcus's first wife asked me if I'd ever get serious about life. I was 39, managing a national sales team, working 70-hour weeks, and had just closed a $30 million acquisition deal. But because I wasn't married, because I didn't post about anniversaries or bring a +1 to Thanksgiving, my life was considered unserious. I remembered every boardroom where I explained my models and strategies with calm precision, only to watch some overconfident 20-something reword it with flair and get applauded like he'd cracked the code to gravity. I remembered being called old school, as if it were a flaw. I remembered laughing along because that's what I thought dignity looked like. I thought if I kept my head down, kept delivering, people would understand, that competence would buy me respect, that family meant protection. But now I understood something I'd never let myself say out loud. I was tolerated, not valued. I was useful, not loved. The difference is sharp when you finally feel it. A few days after the wedding, I opened my laptop not for work, just to check something, and saw an email sitting in my inbox. It was from Renee Chang, the COO of one of our former top clients. Subject line, "You deserved better." The body of the message was short. "I heard what happened. I'm sorry. You built more than they ever understood. If you ever start something on your own, we're with you. No questions asked." I didn't reply, but I reread it over and over, every night before bed, like a prayer, like proof that I wasn't completely invisible. It was the only thing that tethered me to the idea that I hadn't just imagined my worth all these years. Still, I didn't move, not yet. There was a part of me stubborn, wounded, that wanted to vanish completely, to walk away from tech, from family, from all of it, buy a cabin in Montana, learn to fish, change my name, start fresh somewhere. No one could call me background ever again. But another part, the one that had sat through 1,000 investor calls, the one that could quote our Q3 churn rate in his sleep, was starting to stir. I had been erased from my own work. I had been cut out of my own bloodline's celebration, and yet the world hadn't ended. Maybe that was the strangest part. I'd always thought walking away would destroy me, but in that still, quiet room, with nothing left to prove and no one left to impress, I started to feel something unexpected. Freedom. Raw, uncomfortable, but real. What if I didn't need their approval to exist? What if being underestimated was finally an advantage? 3 weeks after I deleted the world from my phone, I quietly filed the paperwork for Ironglass Ventures. No press release, no LinkedIn announcement, just a name, a vision, and one long, slow exhale over a keyboard. The name came from something my mother used to say when I was a kid. Strong things don't shout. They hold, iron and glass, two materials people underestimate, fragile-looking, unassuming, but given the right pressure and purpose, nearly unbreakable. Within days, I rented a small office suite in downtown Palo Alto, bare walls, rental chairs, a single coffee machine. It was enough. I wasn't building for show anymore. I was building for substance. By the end of the first month, 5 of my old clients had signed multi-year retainers worth $68 million in total revenue. Just like that. They didn't ask for guarantees. They didn't blink at my fees. They just asked, "When can we start?" I didn't cry, but I came close. Word started spreading in quiet circles, Noah Grant's back, but this time, not under anyone's thumb. I hired 5 former colleagues, not the loud ones, not the ones who made noise in meetings and disappeared in the trenches, the quiet ones, the ones who did real work. 2 had been laid off. 1 had quit in protest when I was fired. 1 was an intern who had once told me she wished she could learn from me more. Now she was my first junior strategist. We didn't build a company. We built a counter-narrative. Then came the email. Subject: partnership opportunity. From Stratus Edge. It was addressed to Dear Iron Glass Ventures Leadership Team. Cold, corporate, impersonal. But I recognized the name of the sender, Alex Rivera, the same CEO who had looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't aligned with the company's future. The email outlined a potential collaboration. Stratus Edge was applying for a $120 million federal fintech grant, public-private initiative, high visibility. They were seeking strategic support from an elite boutique firm with proven track record in client lifecycle optimization. In other words, the very model they had stolen and rebranded. They wanted help building the same engine I had invented. I didn't reply, not by email. Instead, I let the silence do the talking. 2 weeks later, I got an invitation to the National FinTech Policy Roundtable in D.C., a hybrid summit, private sector leaders, federal stakeholders, press. I wasn't just invited. I was the keynote speaker. Topic: the future of adaptive client strategy in a post-disruption economy. I was told the guest list would include over 300 attendees, including high-level execs from major fintech firms, including Stratus Edge. I flew to D.C. the night before, stayed in a quiet hotel near Georgetown, and wrote my speech by hand. No drama, no revenge, just truth. On the morning of the summit, I stood behind the curtain as they introduced me. My heart wasn't racing. I was calm, settled, like a man who had finally stopped trying to prove he belonged. When I stepped onto the stage, I saw him in the second row, Alex Rivera, expensive suit, polished loafers, notepad in hand. His eyes widened when he heard my name, then froze when he realized where I was standing. I didn't look away. The speech lasted 20 minutes. I spoke about what real scalability looks like, about the false efficiencies of outsourcing intuition, about the cost of erasing people behind processes. And I closed with this. The most dangerous lie in modern business is that vision comes only from visibility, that the loudest person must know best. But I've found that real value often comes from the person no one notices until they're gone. Silence. Then applause. Even Rivera clapped, slow and hesitant, like he wasn't sure whether to be impressed or afraid. After the panel, there was a networking session, polite handshakes, industry jargon, business cards. And then he approached me. "Noah," he said, offering his hand like nothing had happened. "I have to say, impressive showing, really. You're doing something special." I nodded. "Thanks." He paused, searching for the right tone. "We were serious about the collaboration. That grant's a big deal. We'd love to find a way to—" "Alex," I said, cutting in, my voice steady. "Let me make this easy. You don't get to walk someone out of a company they built and then invite them back when you realize you need the foundation." He blinked. It wasn't personal. "That's the problem." I said, "It should have been." He tried to recover. We had to make changes. Your methods were effective." I said, "They were effective." He opened his mouth, then closed it. I looked him in the eye. You fired me before you figured out how I worked, and now you're trying to rent what you don't understand. He said nothing. I smiled politely, then walked away. That evening, back in my hotel room, I updated the Ironglass Ventures website, just one line at the top of the homepage. Built by the underestimated for the overlooked. And beneath it, smaller. We don't scale noise, we scale impact. 2 days after the round table, I flew back to Palo Alto. The sun felt different, not warmer, not softer, just clearer, like the fog I had been living under had finally lifted. That evening, my phone rang. It was Marcus. For a moment, I considered ignoring it again, but something in me wanted to hear his voice, to see if he'd changed his tone after the round table went viral in our circles. My face had been on every tech blog that morning, and someone had already turned a quote from my keynote into a LinkedIn carousel. I answered. "Hey," he said, casual, like nothing had happened. Saw the panel. Elise sent me the clip. You looked good up there. Thanks. He paused. Listen, I was thinking we should grab dinner, maybe talk things through. I know the wedding situation was complicated. I let the silence stretch. Complicated. That was his word for cutting me off the guest list after I gave him $50,000, for making sure his new wife's socialite circle wasn't disrupted by his weirdly quiet brother, for not even calling after I lost my job. Sure, I said, let's talk. We met at a bistro he liked, outdoor patio, wine pairings, small plates. I wore jeans and a black button-up. He was in a blazer and loafers, as always. He smiled when he saw me. You look different. Free, I said. We sat, ordered, talked about nothing for a few minutes. Then he leaned in. Look, I know things went sideways, but Elise's side had press there. And we were trying to curate a certain vibe. You get that, right? It wasn't personal. I sipped my wine. That's the second time I've heard that this month. He blinked. From who? Doesn't matter. The point is, it was personal. You made it personal the moment you took my money and decided I wasn't worth a seat at your table. He looked uncomfortable now, like he'd just realized this wasn't going to be a forgiveness dinner. You know, he started, Dad always said you were the rock, the stable one. I guess I just assumed you'd understand. That's the thing. I interrupted. I did understand. I understood that you and Elise were embarrassed of me, that I didn't fit the aesthetic, that it was easier to cash my check than to explain why your brother works in tech but doesn't dress like a VC. Noah, that's not fair. It's exactly fair, I said. I've spent my whole life making sure this family had backup. I never asked for attention, never demanded the spotlight. I just showed up, paid the bills when Dad was sick, wired money when Elise's foundation hit a funding gap, and didn't flinch when you needed a down payment. His jaw clenched. So what? This is about money now. No, this is about respect, and the fact that I've let all of you confuse silence with consent for far too long. He leaned back. His expression shifted, less guilty, more annoyed. You're being dramatic-y." "No," I said. "I'm drawing a line." He stared at me. I could see him calculating what to say next, probably weighing whether this would blow over if he just let me vent. But I wasn't venting. I was done. "I won't fund anything else." I continued. "No more wire transfers. No more quiet fixes. If you or Elise or anyone else in this family needs a bailout, don't call me. I'm not the fallback anymore." His mouth opened, then closed. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm just done playing a role I never auditioned for." We finished the meal mostly in silence. He didn't protest the check I paid it, for old time's sake, but he didn't thank me either. When I got home, I sat at my desk and stared at the Iron Glass Ventures website. The old header read, "Built by the underestimated, for the overlooked." I clicked into the editor, typed something new. "For builders, not for politicians." Then I logged out. I didn't need to shout my boundaries anymore. I just needed to live them. And for the first time in a long, long while, I did. I live differently now. I bought a cabin near Lake Tahoe, not a grand lake house or some architectural trophy, just a simple A-frame tucked between pines, where the morning mist rolls off the water like breath exhaled from the earth itself. It's quiet, the kind of quiet you have to earn. No conference calls, no performance reviews, no one knocking on my office door asking if I can run one more projection by close of day. I work 4 days a week, and Fridays are mine. I wake before sunrise, lace up my boots, and head toward the water with a rod and a thermos. I'm not particularly good at fly fishing. Half the time I come back empty-handed, but that's not the point. It's the rhythm I crave, the cast, the stillness, the waiting, no deliverables, no expectations. Iron Glass Ventures is now valued at $220 million after its first VC round. I still own 68%. I could sell, cash out, walk away completely, but I don't, not yet. We're building something real, and not just in revenue, in culture, in clarity. I've created a place where quiet people are heard, where ideas matter more than showmanship, and where no one has to twist themselves into a brand just to be seen. A few weeks ago, my phone rang. It was Marcus. For once, he didn't open with pleasantries. "I owe you an apology," he said, "for a lot of things." I didn't say anything. He went on. "I didn't understand what you did. Not really. I thought because you weren't loud, you weren't leading, because you didn't care about spotlight. You didn't care at all. But I saw what you built, and I realized maybe I was the one missing something." He paused, maybe expecting me to swoop in and say it was all fine, that we were good. But we weren't, not really. And still, I listened, not because I needed the apology, but because he needed to give it. And I was finally in a place where I didn't have to carry anyone's shame in exchange for peace. These days, I don't chase recognition. I don't try to win family dinners or explain my choices to people who never tried to understand them in the first place. I stopped giving explanations to those committed to misunderstanding me. I've learned that boundaries are not walls. They're doors with locks only you control. I've also learned that legacy isn't what you leave in your will. It's how people speak your name when you're not in the room. I don't know if Marcus will ever fully see me for who I am. I don't know if Elise will stop pretending her charity exists in a vacuum. And I don't care. Not anymore. They can live in their narratives. I've written my own. I built something lasting, not for applause, but for impact. Not to be remembered by the ones who overlooked me, but to be respected by those who walked beside me when I had nothing but silence and a backbone. So now, as I sit on this cabin deck, watching the sky turn pink and gold over the treetops, I'm asking you, whoever you are, wherever you are, what's more important, being remembered by the ones who ignored you, or being respected by the ones who followed you? And maybe more than that. What would happen if, just for once, you chose peace without needing permission? I did. And I'm still here,